Hey, what's up? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the planning and preparation I've put into my upcoming trip to Seoul, South Korea / Busan, South Korea. So a little bit of backstory. This is actually the first time that I've planned a trip. Every other time that I've traveled overseas has been with family. This time I'm going without family. And when I've gone with family, they've covered the trip, but that would also mean I would generally have to follow what was under their agenda. So planning is a new experience for me, and I just wanted to share some of my thoughts about it. Starting off, I've got a New Zealand passport, and I don't think there's anything special or extra that I need to do in terms of visas for my stay in South Korea. I'm only staying there for about 8 or so days. Actually, so this is a multi-destination trip. I'm in New Zealand at the moment. I'll be stopping through Australia, Sydney, Australia, before I get to Seoul, South Korea. That's because I'm taking a Qantas flight to South Korea. Once I'm in Seoul, I'll be going straight to Busan essentially the next day. And then I'll spend a couple of days in Busan. From Busan, I'll take a flight to Japan, travel around Japan a little bit, back to Busan, train back to Seoul, spend a couple of days in Seoul, and then pass through Sydney. I think I've got just enough time to maybe have lunch there, see the Opera House potentially, and then back to New Zealand. So it's been a long time since I've been on a flight. Last time was about 7 years ago to South Korea. We were actually planning a trip back there as a family for my granddad's 90th birthday a few years ago, but due to COVID, the pandemic, flights being cancelled, and quarantines, it essentially fell through, and unfortunately we missed that moment. But I digress, and because it's been so long since I've been on a flight, because it's been so long since I've traveled, I did a bit of research to see if there's any interesting things that I should take with me on my trip that might make the trip a little better. Firstly, a travel adapter. This is probably pretty self-explanatory. Different countries may have different power outlets, so to be able to use the one that you use in your country, you may need an adapter to be able to use it in another country. Then we have a power bank, which to me is nearing on an essential nowadays, with most travelers probably having a smartphone or such. This is a 10,000 milliamp hour power bank. I think you might need to check with your airline what the limits are, but I think 10,000 milliamps is generally quite safe, but take that with a grain of salt. When you buy these things, or when you buy anything before a trip, I think it's probably good to test them and make sure they actually work, rather than getting there and then finding out that the things you buy don't work. Another thing that I got is an Apple AirTag. And the reason I got this was to place in my checked-in luggage. Not necessarily that it would prevent the item from being lost, but with the idea that if it did get lost, it might be helpful to find. And I think you would need to check with your airline whether or not you can actually use this, because I think some airlines don't allow it. And in fact, from what I've read online, South Korea, these don't actually work in South Korea. I don't know if that's true, but last time I checked, that's what I read. One of the more interesting items that I've purchased for this trip is this AirFly Pro. And what this is supposed to do is allow you to connect your Bluetooth headphones or earphones to a 3.5mm audio jack. And my intentions of using this is on the flights. Because I've got wireless earphones that have some noise cancelling ability, I'm hoping that it will help drown out some of the loud baseline noise within the airplane. Last but not least, I got this mini smart Wi-Fi socket. And what this does is connects to your Wi-Fi and allows you to control an electrical appliance that requires power through an app on your mobile device. As long as your device has internet, anywhere that you have access to internet, you'll be able to turn your appliance on or off with a toggle within the app. And this can be used for something like a lamp, a dehumidifier, etc. Just to talk a little bit more about picking the flight, I actually only booked my flight 4 months in advance, which I think is a relatively short time, But I did this because A, by the time I decided I wanted to go, I was eager to go and didn't want to wait long. B, the further out the departure it is, the harder it is to predict what might change before that time. And C, I knew in the destinations that I was looking at in March, it would be autumn, which I wanted it to be kind of cool or chilly so that I wouldn't be sweating walking around a lot. So basically at this point, I started Googling flight prices from Auckland to the locations of interest, which for me were Japan and South Korea. One thing I noticed was the flight price from Auckland to Tokyo, Japan return was about 1,700 New Zealand dollars, whereas the flight price from Auckland to Seoul, South Korea return was about 1,250 New Zealand dollars. So it was much cheaper at the time to go to South Korea. And with this information, I also looked into the flight price from Busan, South Korea to Tokyo, Japan, and that was about 550 New Zealand dollars. So all in all, it was roughly a similar price to do both South Korea and Japan than just the single trip to Japan, which made it pretty obvious to me that I should do both. And that was pretty awesome for me because it was something that I'd always wanted to do. Since the countries are so close together, it kind of makes sense to try and do them both at once. One little tip is if you look to the left and right of your departure day, you may actually be able to find cheaper flights. So if you've got flexibility there, I would recommend that. One of the things that I noticed is the Saturday flight was a little bit more expensive than the Monday flight. And although it would be nice to kind of fly out at the end of a work week, I actually chose to fly on the Monday because it was a little bit cheaper. One of the other options I had when picking the flight was the layover time in Sydney, Australia. Because I picked a Qantas flight from Auckland to get to Seoul, there was a layover in Sydney first. And on the way to Seoul, I decided to pick the flight with the shortest layover. But on the way back, I picked a slightly longer layover to try and get a chance to see Sydney. And the layover I picked was about, I think, 8.5 hours or so. And I think from what I've heard from someone from Qantas is that if you've got a layover longer than 6 hours, you've got a chance to kind of leave the airport and come back. So yeah, that's why I picked that one. Anyways, that's pretty much all the planning I've done so far. There's still a few more weeks before I go, so I'll probably refine things as I get closer to departure. Hope you found that video interesting. Thanks for watching. See you next time.